All right, how we doing? My wife tells me that the picture I showed you in the last part, where we were standing there in front of the water, that wasn't upstate New York. That was Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I stand corrected, and obviously can't correctly remember events in my own life. Anyway, what we're going to do in this segment here is we're going to begin to talk about marriage. Okay, uh, and I think the first thing is we need to say a little something about definite how we're going to define it, and that there are problems, I think, in anthropology over how we would define marriage. So let's start with this definition here. Um, or actually, what I should say is the source of the problem in defining marriage in anthropology is the fact that, or the idea that, we can't really come up with a universal definition of marriage. There's so much diversity within cultures that coming up with one single definition of marriage is hard, because we're always going to find some culture that is an exception to that definition. Excuse me. So let's start with a couple of different definitions. So we have Nancy Bonvillain, um, who says that marriage is a socially recognized and stable, enduring union between two adults who publicly acknowledge their rights and obligations and form a new alliance between kin groups. So what we want to underline in this definition here is, well, she's saying it's between two adults. All right, maybe you're going to get an idea where I'm going with this. Okay, and then we also have a more traditional definition of marriage. Marriage as a culturally defined relationship between a man and a woman from different families that regulate sexual intercourse and legitimizes children. Well, here again, underline, well, it's between a man and a woman. So again, you see where I'm going with this. If you remember, even back to the first slide here, what we started with, I showed you a picture of some different polygamous arrangements, and then the idea then that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. Well, that's something that even in our society we're debating right now and fighting over. Okay, so let's continue with that. But before I go on, I wanted to just draw your attention to. Well, let me see if I can point over there. Draw your attention. I can't. It's like looking in a mirror. How am I? There we go. I point at this picture right here. Um, this is my nephew. This kid right here. This guy right here is my nephew, and his lovely bride, Lisa. And they actually just had a baby not too long ago, back a few months ago, named Sadie Rose. But this is a picture of part of their wedding ceremony. Now, my nephew converted to Judaism after he got engaged to Lisa, and what we're seeing here, this thing here, is called a ketubah, right? The ketubah, and it is I don't know how to describe it, but it's not a marriage contract, but it's more like a written version, very fancy, very ornate, handwritten version of the marriage vows, and it's customary for the bride and the groom, prior to actually going through the wedding ceremony, to sign it. So it's a kind of a closed little ceremony. Who knew that I was an elder? It's supposed to be witnessed by the elders of the family. So who knew that I was now an elder? I didn't know that. So just again, another little bit of a mood setter. And boy, it was a great wedding. Let me tell you, you get Jewish folks together with Italian folks and The reception was just outrageous. In fact, we had the signing of the ketubah, and there was a little kind of a buffet involved with that, and then the actual marriage ceremony after that. There was a full-blown reception. It was crazy. Really great stuff. So anyway, where are we going next? Okay, so what are some difficulties with that traditional definition that I read you in the last slide? What are some problems with that? Well, first of all, again, I said there's a lot of cross-cultural diversity in marriage customs and marriage roles. And so I gave you some examples. So I got 4 examples of places where we would find some cross-cultural diversity of marriage customs. The first one has to do with, well, why do people get married? What's the reason why people get married, right? So I have up here romantic love versus arranged marriages. When we think of our society, I have romantic love there in quotes, right? So when we think of our own society, and we think of, well, why do people marry each other? They marry each other because they love, we're in love, they love each other. The Hallmark card, version of why people get married, romantic love. Now, actually, if we look at our own culture and look at the history of our own culture, even that whole idea of romantic love, it really starts to develop during the 19th century as we are moving into industrialization. Now, romantic love involves an idea where people are marrying for their own purposes, right? They fall in love with each other and they are marrying because they want to be mutually happy, and it's their own decision. Now, contrary to that, and prior to that, and in other cultures, you have arranged marriages, right, where people are not marrying for their own purposes; they're marrying because of the purposes of their family, right? Now, in our society, we're much more individualistic, so we're going to do things for our own purposes. But in other cultures, rather than being individualistic, they are what I would call communitarian, right? So if families decide that the marriage between, the parties involved is advantageous to both families, and they do that by agreement. Well, then maybe people are, if we live in a communitarian society where we're putting the needs of our family first, well, maybe we'll be okay with that, right? So arranged marriages. Why are we forming arranged marriages? Well, because we need to form some kind of a political or an economic or other alliance. The other reason, I have this here, the continuation of the lineage, right? Why are we getting married? Something that has to do with the continuation of the lineage. So I have the example up here of ghost marriage, which is a custom that was practiced by the New Heir. And actually, ghost marriage, this thing I'm going to describe to you as ghost marriage among the New Heir, is an example of what we're going to call later on, and not too long, we're going to call it levirate marriage, Levirate, levirate marriage, among these people called the New Heir, who live in, who live in the Sudan, right? They live in the Sudan region. So what ghost marriage involves, and I say the purpose of ghost marriage has nothing to do with romantic love or anything like that. It has to do with continuation of the lineage. So remember I said, right, kinship in a lot of traditional societies and indigenous societies is the organizing principle of that society. So continuation of the lineage would also have to do with the inheritance of wealth. Now, among the New Heir, the most important form of wealth is cattle, okay? So what happens? Well, what happens when a lineage does not produce an heir? Now that lineage, that family is threatened, if there's no heir for the wealth to go to, of other kinds of claims being made on that wealth. So they've got to have customs and so forth built into the kinship system and into the institution of marriage that assures that there's going to be a way to transmit that wealth from one generation to the next. So what ghost marriage, what ghost marriage among the new heir said, or how it worked was, let's say we have a married couple, we have a married man and a married woman, they're married to each other. Okay. Now, let's say he dies, right? He dies before they produce an heir, before they have any kids, maybe. So before they produce an heir. Now, the lineage is threatened with, nowhere for that wealth to go to the next generation. So they have this custom of ghost marriage, which is really levirate marriage, that now says if the husband dies before they have children, one of his brothers, right, if he has them, one of his brothers or maybe the next closest male relative will marry the widow. And then if they have children, now they will have children, and those children will be considered to be the children of the dead guy. Okay, continue his line. So I wanted to read. Let me get Nancy Bondelaine over here, and I want to read what she says about ghost marriage. Okay, and we're actually going to have another little custom from the new era a little bit later on. So here's what Nancy Bondelaine says. She said, "The importance of descent and continuity of patrilineages is demonstrated in two practices concerning marriage." We're going to talk about one of them right now. If a married man dies without sons, one of his younger brothers marries the deceased man's wife, and the children of the new couple are considered heirs of the first husband. Okay. Thus, a new heir ghost marriage permits an older brother fictively, remember that idea of fictive, right? Fictive kin, right? Thus, a new heir ghost marriage permits an older brother fictively to provide continuity for his patrilineage even after his own death. Because seniority in a lineage is an important criterion for determining relative social status, allowing descent to follow from an older sibling is a strategic practice. So there you go. So why are these people getting married? Not because they love each other, but because of the necessity of the lineage to continue so that the wealth of that family can be passed down to its next generation. Okay? All right. So that's one source of diversity in marriage, is the reason why people get married. What are the motivations behind marriage? Now, another source of diversity, another source of cultural diversity, is diversities in mores, right? Norms surrounding sexuality and marriage. In our society, and in many societies, we have this notion that sexuality is legitimately contained, right, within marriage. But that's not necessarily true of every society. And then what else do we think about, right? When we think about marriage and we think about cohabitation, we think about, men and women who are married live together, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case either. So I have here, hold on. Here's Peoples and Bailey, right? Peoples and Bailey, and they're talking about cohabitation as a custom. And they say, even cohabitation in the same house, right, does not universally accompany marriage. In many villages in Melanesia, Southeast Asia, and Africa, the men sleep and spend much of their time in a communal house called appropriately the men's house, while the wives and young children live and sleep in a separate dwelling. So in those societies, in those cultures, husbands and wives don't even live together. They live in different houses. They live in different dwellings. Okay? All right? And then we get this notion. Is marriage a union between a man and a woman? Well, like I said, right, we are fighting over this in our culture right now, right? We're fighting this culture war over whether or not marriage is uh, between a man and a woman, or are same-sex marriages legitimate, right? Okay. Now we have examples, across cultures of same-sex marriages. Um, Historically, and one of them that we could talk about, we talked about the new era, right? We talked about the new era here with ghost marriage and the importance of continuing a lineage. And now we get another new era custom, which is woman marriages, okay? Woman marriages. And they also are a marriage custom that was set up to assure the continuation of a lineage so that wealth could be passed down to the next generation. So in that type of marriage, I'm going to read you Nancy Bonvillain again, but in that type of marriage, a woman who is childless, right, can become socially, she can become a man, right? She can become and legally become a man, right? And now as a man, she can marry, okay? And then, so she's going to marry, she marries, or the woman husband marries a woman. A surrogate is selected somehow, right? And now the wife of the woman husband has children, and those children are considered to be part of her lineage. So now she is technically now fathering an heir. All right. So I'm going to read you what Nancy Bonvillain said there. Okay. So here, Nancy Bonvillain, again, talking about the new era, the other marriage practice among new era society that allows for the continuation of a lineage. And here's what Nancy Bonvillain said. She said, another marital option is possible in cases where a lineage has not produced a male heir. In that event, a woman in the lineage can take the fictive, there's that word again, right? Can take the fictive role of husband and be married to another woman. The woman who becomes a husband is usually barren, and therefore the option of tracing descent through her is not possible. The wife has sexual relations with a chosen man, but her children belong to the husband's lineage, right, to the woman husband's lineage, rather than to that of their biological father. According to Evans Pritchard, such marriages are by no means uncommon. In marriages between women, the woman who acts as husband is transformed into a legal man. As a man, she can receive bride wealth given in marriages for her kinswomen, and she can inherit cattle from her father. Similarly, as a husband, she can be compensated with cattle if her wife has an adulterous affair without her consent. Right? Everybody got that? So we got a couple of things going on in there. First of all, this marriage custom that allows for the continuation of the lineage, but we also have the notion of, we use that word fictive, so the woman can become let me read that again. A woman in the lineage can take the fictive role of husband. And also in that quote is the distinction between biological fatherhood and social fatherhood. The surrogate is the biological father, but who cares about him, right? The woman, husband, now becomes the social father. So now we're talking about social parenthood. Okay. So let me finish with what Nancy Bonvillain says about all this. She says, the new era practices of marriage between women and ghost marriage both function to create fictive fatherhood in order to secure the continuity of patrilineages. That's really important, securing the continuity of patrilineages. These marital options demonstrate the difficulties faced in strong lineage systems based on patrilineal descent. Because it is women who bear children, The link between a father and his heirs is indirect. Patrilineal groups must recruit women through marriage to bear children belonging to the patrilineage. Okay, everybody all right? So, what do we end up with? Again, diversity in marriage customs. So much diversity in marriage customs that we can't come up with a universal definition of marriage, okay? But what can we say about marriage, right? So no matter how we define it, what can we say about it? Well, first of all, I'm going to say, before I say anything on this list, I'm going to say, right, that marriage is a cultural universal. Every culture seems to have some version of marriage, okay? Every culture seems to have some version of marriage. And again, no matter how we define it, what else can we say about it? Number one, it implies a set of rights, right? A set of rights. And also responsibilities. So what kinds of rights and responsibilities do people in a marriage have toward each other? Okay. All marriage does that. Number three, I guys kind of skipped over. I kind of combined number one and number two. Number three, marriage creates bonds between families, right? Marriage unites families, and those bonds have social, right? They at least have social, or they're also going to have economic, political, and ritual, that is to say, religious aspects, right? And then, oh, I didn't have to, right? So finally, right, it's a cultural universal. I keep getting that way ahead of myself. There seems to be some form of marriage in every culture. So then, what does marriage do? What are its functions? Okay. Well, it forms social bonds, right? We already said that. So marriage forms social bonds and creates relationships that provide for the needs of children, right? It, secondly, defines rights and obligations of marriage partners toward each other and toward other people. And so those four things I have underneath it with the stars next to it, well, those are examples of the areas in which we're finding, or the areas in which rights and obligations are defined, okay? And relationships toward other people are defined, okay? All right. Now, we're also going to continue talking about this idea of diversity in marriage customs, and I have 5 different categories of marriage customs here. And I've broken these marriage customs down, these marriage rules. These are really rules, marriage rules. All marriage customs imply rules about different kinds of things. And I've broken them down into 5 sorts of questions that marriage rules answer, right? So the marriage rules answer: who can you marry, right? Number 1. How many can you marry, right? Who are you obligated to? Okay, you're obligated to yourself, or you're obligated to your family, right? Who gets what? Now, when I mean who gets what, I mean, let me get this here. Whoop. Who gets what, right? What is owed to people? Okay, what is owed to people? Every marriage, every marriage union implies some kind of an economic exchange, and that's what we're talking about here, are economic exchanges surrounding marriage when we talk about who gets what. Okay. And then finally, where can you live? Very important idea. Where can you live? All right. So let's start at the top and work our way down. Who can you marry? Well, I got 2 words up there. Okay. 2 words up there. Exogamy and endogamy. Exogamy and endogamy. Right? Exogamy. Now, first of all, you look at those words, you see they end in G-A-M-Y. They all end in G-A-M-Y. And so when any word that ends in G-A-M-Y is about marriage, okay? So, like monogamy, right? It ends in G-A-M-Y, it's about marriage. Exogamy, endogamy, they're both about marriage. But what they're talking about, again, is who can you marry? So exogamy is a rule that says you have to marry somebody out of your group, however it is defined, however that group is defined. Okay, so just think of it, exogamy, exit, going out. Okay, so you have to marry somebody out of your group, however it is defined. Then over here, you see I have notes on the incest taboo. I probably shouldn't be using a yellow pen, but I have notes on the incest taboo. All right, and I may send you a little email attachment. I have them written up in about a page. You can look at them for yourself. Notes on the incest taboo. So basically, every society has incest taboos. And then what is it saying? Well, incest taboos are saying you have to marry somebody outside of your family, right? So the incest taboo is a rule of exogamy, okay? All right, what about endogamy? Well, endo sounds like going in, right? Endogamy, marrying in. So at the same time as there are exogamous rules, there are also endogamous rules. And the endogamous rules say that you have to marry within your group, right? However that is defined. So we might have rules about, for example, or some groups may have rules about, for example, you got to marry inside your religion, right? That would be a rule of endogamy. Or in India, right? Traditional India, you have to marry inside your caste. Okay, so those are endogamous marriage rules. So that's the first little category of rules that we're talking about are rules about exogamy and endogamy. Next one, how many people can you marry at once? Well, we got different words that describe that. Monogamy, right? Monogamy. And then we have serial monogamy, okay? So monogamy means you can only marry one person at a time, right? Or you can only marry one person, okay? Now, some societies are going to have rules of monogamy that are going to say, well, you get one shot, right? You only get one shot. So you marry somebody and let's say they die, then you're done, right? Sit down, you're done, right? Thanks for playing. Now, on the other hand, a society like ours, we have serial monogamy, right? So serial monogamy means that we're allowed to marry one person at a time, right? Serial monogamy means we're allowed to marry one person at a time, okay? All right. Then we get the word polygamy, right? So here it is again. Yep. Okay, so here it is again. Polygamy ends in G-A-M-Y, so it has to do with marriage, and poly means more than one. So polygamy, the word, that's a general word, okay? Polygamy means that a person can marry more than one spouse at a time. And then we have some related words, right? So there are different types of polygamy. So in general, we're going to have polygyny, right? Whoops. And why does that keep happening? I apologize for that. We got polygyny, right? And we have polyandry. Okay. So polygyny, this here, GYN in polygyny, maybe you've seen that before, right? And in like the word gynecology, it has to do with women, right? So polygyny means a man can have more than one wife. All right, a man can have more than one wife. All right. So go back to the first opening title page of part one of our presentation here, and I showed you the picture of the guy down in the lower left-hand corner with his 4 wives. That's polygyny, a type of polygamy. All right, and then we get polyandry. Okay, oops, damn it. We get polyandry, and polyandry means that a woman can have more than one husband. All right, so polyandry is the other type of polygamy. All right, now we got 2 other kinds here. Let's go to this one first. Okay, let's go to this one first. All right, sororal polygyny. Okay, sororal. I think I'm saying it right. I think that's right. Sororal polygyny. So that SOR sounds like sorority, right? It has to do with sisters. So sororal polygyny is where a man marries a group of sisters. Okay, very rare. It's actually very rare. The other one here, fraternal polyandry, you have an article about that one, right? You have that article, When Brothers Take a Wife. Now, fraternal polyandry is where, again, now a group of brothers will take more than one, or excuse me, a woman, let's say, a woman marries a group of brothers. Okay. So, in Tibet, right, that article tells you that this is something that's practiced in this part of Tibet that your author is. But I want to get that article here and read something to you about it. Okay. So this is Melvin Goldstein's article, When Brothers Take a Wife. And what does this fraternal polyandry look like, and why do they practice it there? Why is fraternal polyandry practiced in Tibet? Okay, so here we go. Here I'm reading from Goldstein. Goldstein. He says, the eldest brother is normally dominant in terms of authority, that is, in managing the household, but all the brothers share the work and participate as sexual partners. Tibetan males and females do not find the sexual aspect of sharing a spouse the least bit unusual, repulsive, or scandalous, and the norm is for the wife to treat all the brothers the same. Okay, the norm is for the wife to treat all the brothers the same. Offspring are treated similarly. There is no attempt to link children biologically to particular brothers, and a brother shows no favoritism toward his child, even if he knows that he is the real father, in other words, the biological father, because, for example, his older brothers were away at the time the wife became pregnant. The children, in turn, consider all of the brothers as their fathers and treat them equally, even if they also know who their real father is. In some regions, children use the term father for the eldest brother and father's brother for the others, while in other areas they call all the brothers by one term, modifying this by the use of elder or younger. All right? So that's a little description of the custom. Now, why do they do it? So I'm going to read you this paragraph from Goldstein. And I'm reading out of this book here, and so I'm on page 164. And here's what Goldstein says. He says, the Tibetans' own explanation for choosing fraternal polyandry is materialistic. Let me stop there for just a second. What Goldstein is saying is, that even the people, right, themselves understand the reason they do this custom, and it sounds like cultural materialism, right? Marvin Harris, cultural materialism. So we got to, what did Harris say? Harris said, well, you look at cultural customs and you understand the origin of cultural customs by understanding the relationship between the custom and material circumstances, right? Like economic circumstances and population and so on. In this case, you understand this custom in relationship to the availability of land, right? The availability of farmland. So let's continue here. The Tibetans' own explanation for choosing fraternal polyandry is materialistic. For example, when I asked Dorje why he decided to marry with his two brothers rather than take his own wife, he thought for a moment, then said it prevented the division of his family's farm and animals and thus facilitated all of them achieving a higher standard of living. And when I later asked Dorhe's bride whether it wasn't difficult for her to cope with three brothers as husbands, she laughed and echoed the rationale of avoiding fragmentation of the family and land, adding that she expected to be better off economically since she would have three husbands working for her and her children. Okay, there you go. So, the purpose behind this whole thing, you gotta think about it this way, is to keep land from being broken up into units that become too small to become viable. If I own some land and I have three sons, and I give each of them a portion of the land, right? And then they go on and they, so I've taken my land and I've broken it up, split it up, right? Now, my three sons, they have kids, and now those units become even smaller. And then they have kids, and those units become smaller still, until after a few generations, the land is not viable. You can't support a family on it anymore. So the purpose in this society, the way that they handle that problem, is the brothers marry a single woman, and whatever children they have, right? Then now that land gets passed on to all of those brothers. Okay, everybody follow that? All right. So it keeps the land together from generation to generation and keeps it viable. In Europe, they solved that problem through the custom of primogeniture. And what primogeniture in Europe said, back when we were an agricultural society, said was that land is inherited by the oldest son. So if you were the oldest son, you got the land, and if you were the youngest son, you got screwed. Okay? So that kept the land together. So it's just a different way of solving that same problem, keeping the land together generation after generation after generation to keep it viable. All right? Everybody good? Okay. Who are you obliged to? Let's go to that next one. Who are you obliged to? Is it yourself? Well, in our society, people marry for their own interests, but we have other kinds of customs, like I talked about, arranged marriages. So who are you obliged to? Well, in a system where you have arranged marriages, you're obliged to your family. It's what your family wants, okay? And then we have levirate. I talked about ghost marriage as an example of levirate. And I have some quotes from the Bible here, right? So these quotes from the Bible, right here and right here, illustrate that even, these are from the Old Testament and showing how levirate was practiced back then for the same reason that the New Era practiced it, to maintain the continuation of a lineage. So we have this quote from Genesis 38:8. Judah therefore said to Onan his son, "Go into thy brother's wife and marry her, that thou mayest raise seed to thy brother." Okay, so you're marrying your brother's widow, but your children are your brother's, okay? And his property goes to them. And then we have this reading here from Deuteronomy 25, verse 5 and 6. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. Not really different at all, right, from that New Era custom of ghost marriage. Okay. Now, the last word we have here is sororate marriage. And again, that has to do with sisters. So if oh boy, sorry. There we go. So sororate marriage, if okay, how'd this work now? I got to get this right. If a man and a woman are married and the wife dies, then he marries one of the wife's sisters. That's called sororate marriage, and that's rarer. That's rarer than levirate marriage. Okay, who gets what? Bride service, bride wealth, and dowry. So these things have to do with an economic exchange that's made at the time of a marriage, okay? All marriages involve some kind of economic exchange, even like all of us giving people wedding presents, right? That's an economic exchange. But we got some other customs too. Bride service, all right? So bride service, you find that in hunting and gathering societies, right? So the Kung, for example, had this custom of bride service. And then you also have people like the Yanomamo, also bride service, okay? And what bride service is labor, right? Labor that's performed by the groom for the bride's family. It's payment in the form of labor, okay? The groom pays the bride's family this labor, owes the bride's family labor service, okay? Everybody all right? Then we get bride wealth, and we already mentioned bride wealth in connection with the new heir. So bride wealth is now actual wealth that is transferred from the groom's family to the bride's family. So among the new heir, the most important thing that would be exchanged would be cattle, so a number of cattle, but then other things as well, okay? And then dowry, so that might be a word that you are, maybe you remember, right? Or maybe you've heard of before, so dowry. We have that in a lot of agricultural societies, and that's a custom where now it's the bride's family that pays wealth, owes wealth, right, to the groom's family. Okay, so that could take the form of a lot of things. It could be some land, or it could be a house or housing site, or it could be money, it could be a lot of different things. Okay. Let's see. We have a kind of a holdover of this custom of dowry that we practice in our own society, and we don't really know the reason why we do it, but it's kind of a cultural sediment, you know, a holdover tradition. And that would be, you know, the idea that it's the bride's family that pays for the wedding. Okay, I think that's kind of a holdover from that old custom of dowry. Okay, now we get where can you live? These are residency rules, right? Marriage also implies residency rules. And we'll talk a little bit about these as we move along, but let's define them. Patrilocality, matrilocality, ambilocality, bilocality, neolocality, right? Avunculocality, it's a funny sounding word, but they all end in locality. So that's a good way to remember what they are. They have to do with place, right? Place. Where are you going to go live? After you get married, where are you going to go live? Okay? So, patrilocality. Patrilocality means that a man and a woman get married, and after they get married, they go live with or near the family of the groom, right? The family of the groom, the man's family, okay? Matrilocality. Man and woman get married, where are they going to go live? They're going to go live with or near the family of the bride. They're going to go live with her family, okay? We're going to find that in a lot of matrilineal societies. Ambilocality. What does that mean? Well, it means, you know, like being ambidextrous, you know, means you can use either hand, right? Ambi. Well, so either. So we're going to go either, man and woman are going to get married. They're going to go either to the bride's family or the groom's family, but they're going somewhere. They're going to one of those two. Okay, they're going somewhere. Bilocality means both, right? They're going to go live with both. So the Kung, for example, are a bilocal people. They have bilocal marriage customs. So that might mean that, you know, a man and a woman get married, and maybe for a while we're going to live with, maybe they're going to go live with in the husband's band, okay, and move around with the husband's band. But then Maybe circumstances will dictate later on that they'll go live with her family's band, right, and move around with them. Okay, so both. They're going to live for a time here and a time there. Okay, neolocality. Now, this is what we get when we get market societies. So, like our society, we have neolocal marriage customs. So neolocality means that a man and a woman get married and they can go live in a brand new place. They don't have to go to his family. They don't have to go to her family. They can go someplace else. This is typical of societies that have labor markets like ours. Why? Because people have to be able to follow opportunities of the labor market, right? So, you guys are from Western Pennsylvania, and let's say your families are from Western Pennsylvania, and let's say you get married. Now, where are you going to go live? You're going to go live maybe where the jobs are. So that might not be Western Pennsylvania. That might be Arizona, right? Or it might be North Carolina, or it might be Taiwan. Who the hell knows, right? But it could be a brand new place. People go to a brand new place. All right. And then we have avunculocality. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on too. So we find matrilocality, okay, in matrilineal societies, and we find avunculocality in some matrilineal societies. So avunculocality, this word this part of the word, the avuncu, the AVUNC part, means it has to do with uncles. Okay, so avunculocality in a matrilineal society would be where a man and a woman get married and they go to live with or near the bride's mother's brother, right? Or in other words, the bride's maternal uncle. Okay? We okay with that? I hope I got that right. I have a feeling I'm going to be changing that when I get to that point. But let's just keep it there. Keep that, and we'll come back to that if we need to. Okay? Everybody all right? Okay. All right. Okay, that's good. All right, so that's going to conclude, I believe, yes. All right, that's going to conclude our discussion for now. So part 3 will be coming, right? Part 3 will be coming soon. So stay tuned. We'll see you all later on.